Thank you. All right. Well, welcome again, everybody. My name is Selena Feliciano. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Energy Democracy Project, calling in from Lashana Land, West Oakland, California. I am the National Campaign Coordinator for the Reimagine Energy for Our Communities US campaign, or Refocus for short, and I love talking about energy democracy. And energy can be a complicated thing, but it really doesn't have to be. Let's go on to the next slide, please. I think all you have to do is click the space button. Perfect. Yeah, just great. Thank you. Because energy democracy is rooted in reimagining. From Alaska to Puerto Rico, communities that are impacted first and worst by energy injustice and climate change are also rising up to advance systems that support our health and well-being. It's everyday people, just like you and me on today's webinar, that are shifting power from corporations to communities so that we can meet our needs ourselves. And that's what we call energy democracy. Next slide, please. But we're facing a crisis. The energy systems in place today are upheld in centralized power, where energy development, control, ownership, and decision-making resides within Wall Street and corporate electric utilities, up at the top of this illustration. They negatively impact the health and safety of our communities, and they also fail to provide the energy that we need to live, especially in the face of climate disaster. They throw fuel in the fire of climate change, all while we're left in the dust with blackouts and increasing energy bills every single year. But the good news is that there is a way out. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Because we're fighting back and we're organizing to put power back in the hands of the people, to create a system that works for all of us, not just the few at the top. It's time to hold greedy CEOs and the politicians they pay for accountable. And we're demanding our right to clean, affordable energy that's tailored to our communities. Next slide, please. So let's get to the heart of it. What is energy democracy? This is a term that we use a lot of in our organizing, but isn't necessarily a concept that everyone talks about on the daily, especially if you're not in the energy democracy space. But energy democracy is pretty simple. It offers us an alternative from the status quo. It means shifting power to the people, from those folks at the top of the triangle down to the bottom. It means affordable, reliable, and clean energy for everyone across race and class. Low income, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities are prioritized in these transitions. It means having access to the energy that we need to meet our needs ourselves, now and into the future, where we don't have to rely on a corporate or a centralized structure because it's in our hands. Energy democracy means creating an energy system that works for everyone. And it means reimagining the ways that we organize our lives and livelihoods to support the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystems, where we live in tandem with our local ecology, and we all can support clean air, water, and our futures. And when we capture all of these elements, we can create systems that are accountable to us, that are decentralized, democratized, distributed, and diversified. Next slide, please. Well, one thing we have to be clear on is that it's people, not technologies, that are going to lead the way. Energy democracy is more than just solar panels and microgrids, because the solution to climate change is not simply to switch to renewable energy technologies, but rather to shift entire systems of power. We're transforming the energy systems polluting our communities and exploiting our communities and the institutions that prioritize people over profits. That's why we must reimagine the 21st century energy model and create more reliable and equitable energy systems in our communities for our communities. Greedy power companies have failed us by making climate change and injustice worse. And it's time to focus on communities over corporations and those centralized authorities to protect our health, our clean air, and our water. Next slide, please. So the organizing for this vision and this people-powered energy future is happening now, and it's growing from Alaska to Puerto Rico. Together, we're shifting power away from centralized authorities and corporations to envision a reimagined energy future where we all have the energy we need to live, work, and thrive. From today's 3 living examples of energy democracy in practice, you'll get to see the elements of people-powered energy and the diverse approaches that we can take in our organizing when we root solutions in our communities, tailored to our unique needs. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here in today's webinar, and I'll pass the mic over to Yesenia to introduce our incredible panelists.
Thank you for that, Selena. As you mentioned, my name is Yesenia Rivera, and I am the Executive Director of Energy Allies. I'm calling from Piscataway Land, also known as Washington, D.C. Energy Allies is a small nonprofit based in Boston, Massachusetts, and we work to revolutionize the energy system by ensuring that the communities most impacted by climate change lead local clean energy solutions. We believe climate impacted communities have the power and knowledge to lead our equitable clean energy transition. Today, we have 3 great speakers from Massachusetts, Maine, and Mississippi sharing their stories of energy democracy and how we're organizing to put our power back into the hands of the people. First up, we have Gregory King. Gregory is a lead organizer of the Boston Community Solar Cooperative, a coalition of people organizing for a just and clean energy transition in Boston, and the group behind a new community-owned solar array in Dorchester. Gregory is active in conversations around energy and local public advisory boards and agencies. He's also a clean energy workforce development consultant with deep expertise in renewable energy and building energy efficiency. Gregory designs world-class workforce development programs that connect employers, job seekers, technical training organizations, and community-based organizations. Welcome, Gregory.
Thank you, Yesenia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Mike, put up the slides, please. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gregory King, one of the founding members of the Boston Community Solar Cooperative. We're delighted to be here to talk to you guys about our efforts to create a movement where all the solar generation we need to support building decarbonization, transportation electrification, and clean energy on the power grid are owned by communities. Next slide. So at the Boston Community Solar Cooperative, we have our motto is we believe in a future powered by the sun and owned by the community. So our vision of community ownership is relatively unique in so much that we're looking at not just the environmental benefits of owning clean energy production, but also the economic in terms of being able to look at solar as an investment that pays for itself and that generates income every day the sun shines. Next slide. So in Massachusetts, and I noticed there's quite a few folks from Massachusetts, so welcome here. We are one of the leading adopters of solar energy, often considered one of the top states in the country. However, in the last 15 years, we've installed 4.5 gigawatts of solar around the state, almost all of it owned by private companies, not utilities. And only 2% of that solar capacity is actually serving a low-income household or a low-income rooftop. There are no BIPOC-owned solar developers in Massachusetts, and there are incredible environmental, cleaner air, and economic benefits associated with solar system ownership. So one of the biggest opportunities in the energy system transition is the reality that we're going to be building power systems close to where it's used. We can empower communities with the ability to own these assets and to be able to control who gets the jobs, where the projects are sited, and what type of community benefits do we generate. Next slide. And so what the guiding principles for solar energy, and I'm going to give a shout out to my the friends at the Solar Dividends. Solar energy is inexhaustible. It's available all over the world. It has economic value. No one owns the sun. Everyone's entitled to share. We can build a sustainable foundation for the economy. And so there are some around the country that are looking at solar energy as a way of supporting guaranteed basic income, because again, it's a type of investment that pays for itself and that generates cash. Next slide. So in our market, we're up against a number of different challenges. Obviously, very competitive market where we have a lot of public companies and privately owned companies that are competing for different projects. You know, we're challenged trying to find sites. You know, project financing is challenging for us because we're operating in the low income, primarily BIPOC communities of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Jamaica Plain, and you know, finding funding for capacity building has been a challenge. That said, we're about to hit the 2-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, and one of the game changers in the Inflation Reduction Act was really the ability for tax credits for projects to earn tax credits, and for those tax credits to be transferred through a financial transaction that doesn't require the purchaser of the tax credit to actually own the asset. That is the driving change in the law that is enabling us to finance our projects, where we can get up to 50 to 60% of our solar projects funded through a tax credit exchange. Next slide, please. So our goal really is about, we call it Community Solar 2.0. We want to be able to develop and own and build solar arrays for the purposes of benefiting our communities by generating passive income for families that can be used not only just for energy, but for food, shelter, and education. And so we are a group of individuals who are committed to using the investment in solar to serve the public good. Next slide, please. And in our model, think of us as a solar developer that has just one unique element. It's owned by our workers who are community members. And so our vision is we're currently developing our first solar array on the rooftop of an affordable housing building that has a food co-op in the basement, on the ground floor. And we are looking to develop additional sites around the city. As we add more sites, we'll be able to afford to support more members. And our members are workers who are paid as part of their role in the co-op, but they also earn shares, which entitles them to a share of the income we generate, the excess income we generate by creatively financing our project. So in summary, next slide, please. You know, some of the advantages of our community-owned solar approach is, you know, passive income for members from profits. Solar is a reliable source of funding. We have full control over our project development. We are creating jobs for community members. We can scale up our operations by acquiring more sites. It's a low risk investment. Every day the sun shines, we earn income from the sale of electricity. Our subscribers get a discount. Our members get passive income. It pays for itself. And of course, there's a bunch of environmental co-benefits for clean energy generation. And thank you for listening to me. I'll pass it back to Yesenia.
Thank you for that, Greg. Next, we have Seth Berry, Last year, Seth helped lead the groundbreaking Our Power Maine campaign, an initiative to kick investor-owned utilities to the curb and establish a consumer-owned utility in Maine. Prior to this campaign, he served as a Maine House representative, serving as chair of the Maine legislature's Joint Standing Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Technology. Seth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Yesenia, and it's great to be with all of you. What a great group. I love seeing some familiar names in the chat and being with these amazing colleagues from Massachusetts, Maine, and Mississippi. I love it that you guys chose the M's today. So I was House Majority Leader and Chair of the Energy Committee in the Maine State Legislature. We have very small legislative districts here, so anyone can step up and run. It's a very participatory state legislature, and we have a great clean election system too that helps us to get elected with more progressive views that are maybe less beholden to your traditional sort of corporate interests. And serving on the Energy Committee, I got very interested in energy democracy and the kind of work that all of you are involved with. This has started back in 2007. And also in solar, very, very interested in seeing more solar policy and very frustrated that our utilities were opposing net metering and similar policies. I was not alone in that. There were many others. And we, over time, really formed the opinion that the only way to deal with our utilities intransigence, which also was, poor service and rent-seeking behavior, was really to get rid of them, to simply reform the model, to have true energy democracy and energy ownership in the form of public power. Realizing that public power is not a panacea, but it really can allow you more accountability. I think we're going to hear more interesting things about that, ownership at the cooperative level soon from the next speaker, which I'm excited for as well. But what we decided was we needed to have a public power utility here and get rid of our two large utilities. They were, at that point, due to some very frustrating behaviors, including a huge billing scandal where they sent over 100,000 erroneous bills, 2 weeks of outage after a storm, which just threw people into a terrible state, and many low-income and disadvantaged people were especially hurt by that. They actually had the worst rating for customer satisfaction of any utility in the country. Our largest utility, Central Maine Power, was ranked below even Pacific Gas and Electric out in California, if you can believe that. I know some of you are privileged PG&E customers. They were even worse than PG&E, which, remember, went bankrupt twice in 20 years, killed people, was convicted of felonies, on it, I could go on. But Central Maine Power was even worse, bottom of the barrel. And we saw an opportunity, and we put forward a bill, first my bill in 2019, which turned into a study because the governor wouldn't support it. We have a Democratic governor, Democratic legislature at that time, but the governor was not ready. She said, let's do a study. I said, okay. So we did a study. And then that came back, kind of mixed. They were hedging their bets a little bit, but it actually basically said it's likely to help. So we put another bill forward in 2021. And that second bill involved sending it out to the people for a referendum as well. We thought maybe the governor would go along with that. Bipartisan majority of the House and a bipartisan majority of the Senate voted in favor of that bill, sending it out to the people, putting the utilities monopoly on the chopping block. That is unprecedented, by the way. No other state that we know of, maybe Nebraska in the 1940s, you could argue, but it was a little different then, has actually done that, has said, this monopoly is a privilege, and the people ultimately should have a say in whether that privilege continues or does not. We put forward an alternative, this public power utility. We said what it would look like. We had a very clear plan for governance with elected board members and others who were appointed. We showed how the purchase, the buyout of the utilities assets would work. It was all very carefully researched and put together. And again, bipartisan majority, a handful of Republicans, most of us were Democrats, but a handful of Republicans even voted in favor of that bill in the House and the Senate. And it made it to the governor's desk. That was just huge. It was a real high watermark for us. And everyone in the state was talking about it that pays attention to politics. even some who do not. That moment in summer of 2021 was critical, because at that point, the governor, after hemming and hawing and hedging her bets, decided to veto our bill. I think she honestly had decided beforehand, but she did veto the bill, and we did not have the 2/3 necessary to override it. So we had to take the other route to referendum, which is to collect signatures. The signatures take a long time to collect. We had COVID to deal with. We ended up spending almost a year and a half collecting signatures, and then about a year collecting signatures, and it took another year then for the vote. So fast forward, and I'll make this quick and look forward to your questions, but fast forward another year, and it's now 2023, fall of last year, and the campaign comes to a head. We were outspent 37-1. Actually, if you take away what it took us to get on the ballot, 54-1, dramatically outspent. And the utilities, with a very clever campaign, managed to flip our polling advantage from, we were up by about 34 points when we ended up losing by 40 points. So this is a cautionary tale. Utilities have unlimited money, and if you really take them on and question their monopoly in a serious way, they will fight back. So we lost. However, there were many wins. And just quickly, before I wrap this up, I just want to mention that we passed a number of bills. There were dozens of bills that were passed holding the utilities more accountable. They were fined $10.5 million by the Public Utilities Commission, and then another $500,000. The utility workers were able to actually get a better contract out of it because there was more scrutiny there. I could go on about the bills that we passed, but solar is going gangbusters here. The utilities are really in a place that they never have been, where the people are paying attention to their mistakes, they're paying attention to their rent-seeking behavior, they're paying attention to their influence, their over-influence in the process. And so Maine people expect more now, and they're paying attention. And we are now going forward as planned with an effort to have more base hits. You know, we tried for the Grand Slam, obviously didn't get it, but base hits are what we're all about now. And we are going to pass more bills. We are going to intervene more often at the Public Utilities Commission. We are working on legislation for next year. So we're very excited to report back on how that's going. We've been kind of gathering steam for that effort. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on your exciting efforts around the country in the same energy democracy world. So that's it for me. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for sharing your story, Seth. Lastly, we have Catherine Robinson, Program Director at One Voice, a nonprofit organization based in Jackson, Mississippi, seeks to magnify voices of traditionally silenced communities in the South. She organizes with residents to hold rural electric co-ops accountable as democratic structures that can enable community-centered solutions, drive resilience initiatives, and address the complex challenge of climate vulnerability. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. As she stated, One Voice is a nonprofit organization that was founded out of the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And one of our goals was to help those underinvested communities that have lost their voices to regain their voices by doing political advocacy, housing, or in knowledge, just working with nonprofit organizations such as the Mississippi State Conference and NAACP to build partnerships to impede issues that we are having in the state of Mississippi. In 2016, One Voice received a call from some of our partners and constituents within the Mississippi Delta, addressing issues that they were having with their electric cooperative associations. In that process, we began to research and started to tackle the issues that they were having. So we created the Electric Cooperative Leadership Institute. Now, as you all know, cooperatives are supposed to be committed to providing energy efficiency, economic development, and job creations. But what we have seen over the years is they're becoming more monopolized, causing lack of transparency and less member engagement. And members are not being aware that their status is a member owner. and they are not focused on meeting member owners' needs, but rather their stakeholders. So our goal with creating the Electric Cooperative Leadership Institute was for us to educate the next intergenerational leaders within these communities that can help bridge the gap and provide a different solution for member owners within their areas by making sure if they want to petition for the board or just do grassroots efforts where they can address the issues and become more of a democratic process within their board. So over the last few years, we have been teaching member owners on how to understand the insides and outs of their utility companies, whether it's electric power association, investor owned, or municipal owned. We make sure that they understand their bylaws from the front to the back. We make sure that they understand who we are up against. Cooperatives have the power to make change on a regular basis. There is minimal control by their commission, depending on the state, and may not have to comply to the utilities regulations for energy. So for the best thing for us is to make sure that we are educating and engaging the constituents within all these electric power associations by doing community grassroots organizing that provides member owners the opportunity to make change. So what we do, we have listening sessions, educating them on what is energy democracy first. And then, of course, the class I just discussed, within that class, they have the opportunity to learn broad of things, not just the bylaws, but the 990 form. What is a capital reserve? How to organize an effective campaign within their electric power association communities, and also how to petition for their board. In the last few years, we have petitioned to run for the board of directors in many of these electric power associations. And one for such, Twin County Electric Power Association, no one has ran in years. In 2017, we ran and we came up to a vote where we had at least 700 people to vote. And over the years, that is a large amount that they've ever had. In 2018, we ran again with three components and three candidates. That was, of course, to educate, engage, and encourage member owners to get involved to make change within their electric power association. Within this process, for the first time, we were able to provide tactics that scared Twin County Electric Power Association. We increased the voting intake at least by 95%. The year before, we only had 700. The next year, we had over 2,000 member owners to vote. So every year that we have petitioned for the board since 2017 and 2018, Twin County has consistently changed their bylaws to make it even harder for us to petition for the board or for someone to get on the board. And so what we are battling here in Mississippi is that we are wanting to have more of a democratic transparency within these boards. Members are not just members, but they are member owners. They own a share in these companies. So we want to educate them onto how to have better benefits for themselves, their families, and all of the surrounding communities around them. In a second, you guys will see that we have worked with 6 other states within the Southeastern region. But we did a scorecard that provides a grade on all of the electric cooperatives in the state of Mississippi. There was only 4 or 5 that received a high grade because they are trying to push towards transparency within these electric power associations. Some of them have provided programs that allow their member owners, if they are struggling to pay their bills, where they will help them in the long term so no one will go without lights. However, we have several that are still suffering. These member owners are having to choose between paying their electric bill and having to pay their medical bills. So I can say, if you get in this energy democracy fight, be prepared that everything is not a win, but it's the chance of having to make a change. And I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. I want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we'll pull from them. But if I can have the panelists all come back on camera, that would be great. So we can do our Q&A. Just waiting on Greg. But in the meantime, this is for all the panelists. What do you see as a reimagined energy future? What does that look to you?
I think I'll go first. Definitely a reimagining energy future. Like I stated before, is a win. If you're playing any sport, the chances is that you're going to make mistakes, but you're going to put your best foot forward. So definitely for energy, it's us working with the utility companies where they comply with the standards of their states, but also having transparency where they provide their members the opportunity to have an input on the best policy decisions that are impacting them and their families. We are in a day now that a lot of people, infrastructure is aging out. And it's time to make a change in regards to renewable energy.
So Yesenia, so my vision of, the energy future that's, available to us really involves the proliferation of renewable energy resources on rooftops in densely urban environmental justice and in BIPOC communities, and where community members aren't paying utility bills, they're getting checks. And this is absolutely possible. Many, here in Massachusetts, as I mentioned earlier, we've had 4.5 gigawatts of solar deployed largely in fairly affluent neighborhoods, and those folks who own those solar panels on their roof, many of them are getting a check every month and not actually paying a utility bill. And so we see a lot of economic opportunity that can be used to support, to address the racial wealth gap, for one, to support, passive income generation. Imagine a business that you own where every day the sun shines after you deploy your array, you're, generating revenue from the sale of electricity. We also see a future where air quality is better, our mortality rates are not so disparate between and other parts of the population, and we see an opportunity where jobs can be created and solar development projects can be sited with complete community control, and who gets those jobs, what companies get hired, are all from the community itself. It's a self-contained ecosystem that is completely available to us now with these new tools to help address the capital costs of establishing or setting up these technologies. Once they're set up, the typical solar project will generate income for 20 to 30 years. So I see a great future for us, and the future is now. We have this unique tool with the Inflation Reduction Act. There was just a study done for the first 18 months of the IRA. There's been about 15 billion in tax credit transfers that have occurred. Only 0.5% went to projects cited in low-income communities. So these are new tools that are out there for us to use, and we need to take advantage of them while they exist, because they do provide, imagine taking half of your capital costs out of your project. That you don't have to borrow money, you just sell a tax exchange. And so there's this unique opportunity we have in the energy transition to change the status quo, to improve our own environmental conditions, and create economic opportunities in our communities, all in parallel.
Thanks, Greg. Seth?
Those were such great answers, and I don't have a lot to add. I think, just looking at it from the individual perspective, and, here in Maine, there's a lot of poverty. We've had many people who have been, disconnected from their utilities, unable to pay their bills, and they're often the most vulnerable, right? people who have had long outages and depend on their electricity to literally to survive because, you know, they have a breathing machine or what have you. This is a reality that is increasing because of extreme weather and because of skyrocketing utility prices and because all that the utilities care about is how can they make more money. And by the way, they've consolidated. They've really, you know, begun to conglomerate, right? So that, you know, large multinationals now own many of our utilities. Just NextEra and Iberdrola alone own, you know, some insane portion of the world's utilities. Those are the two biggest electrical utility owners in the world. Iberdrola owns ours, and we're actually involved in a Public Utilities Commission proceeding right now to try to prevent them from gaining full control of the intermediate holding company that owns our utilities, Avangrid. So I think we really need to watch that and fight back against that kind of monopolistic, you know, extortionist, usurious, you know, behavior by the utilities. That's really ultimately just coming down on people so hard and making it harder for them to afford their bill, harder for them to participate in the process and in a meaningful way and influence utility policy. And also, by the way, hard for them to literally own their energy, like Greg, you know, is talking about, where, you know, solar gives us ownership. So I do think that really when I think about my, you know, lower income neighbors and the struggles that they go through every day, I want to see a day where, and I think this is true for our power, and I think many of us here, where we all of us own at least a piece of our energy. And, you know, that can look like being a member owner in a utility, in a rural electric cooperative. It can look like, you know, public power, which many Americans are about 50 million are fortunate enough to have already. And it can also look like just being a prosumer, not just a consumer, but a producer and a consumer of electricity, where, you know, maybe you have an electric car that can, you know, be a part of providing, you know, peak power. Maybe you own some solar panels that are part of the solution, that it is closer to the load. So we all not just own it, but also participate. I think participation is key. We need to be able to have a say, right? To, you know, energy democracy is what we're after. Democracy is not a spectator sport, right? We have to participate, and we have to feel that participation matters in order to participate. So, you know, what control do I have? What influence do I have? I need to know that my voice does matter. And right now, you know, the typical Public Utilities Commission, or whatever you call it in your state, is a very closed process. It's very legalistic. You know, people, they speak a different language, you know, let's face it, they speak a different language. It's impossible for someone to take the time to participate in that, take the time off work, learn that new language, you know, or hire a lawyer who can help them to do that. So I guess in sum, what I'd like to see and our power is working towards is a future where we do all own and participate and control our energy future. But bigger picture, we're all after, you know, a low cost, low carbon future, and a future of high confidence, where we know we can be confident in our energy source, that it will be there for us, so we can get to work, so that we can, you know, feed our children, so that we, you know, the heat's on in the winter and the air conditioning's on in the summer. Increasingly, these things are about survival, not just you know, not just prosperity.
Thank you for that. First question from the audience. I think Seth and probably Catherine. I'm curious what utility messaging is in fighting campaigns in your regions. What is their messaging that has been effective in fighting community campaigns, and what have you learned from this?
That's a tough one. We can actually go on and on about this. Definitely our messaging has always been honest and accurate information that we provide. Letting them know what the electric per hour associations have done and what they have not done. Typically how we express and get a lot of people involved, I think we do surveys. What is the first question? Some issues that you might be having. And of course, the first question is always, do you have a high electric bill? And majority are going to say, yes, and I'm struggling. And my electric power association have not tried to help me. I went and tried to talk to them to see where this balance is coming from, and I'm not getting anywhere. So our messaging has always been honest, letting them know how we can combat these issues that they are having. One thing that we have experienced is that the Electric Power Association do not want you to be educated on what is the real issues that are going on in these power utilities companies. They are not supposed to be donating to political campaigns, but however, they operate their electric cooperatives as if it's a political stance. And so we have to petition and run these campaigns as if we're running as a political campaign, as if you're running for mayor or state. We have had to reach out to our representatives and our senators about the issues we are having just to get a full-fledged answer from these electric power associations. What I can tell you, what I have learned is that it is more monopolized. They do not want you to gain any knowledge in regards to your electric power association. What it was founded and created for has went out the door. It has become more of, it's about who you know, and that's who I want on the board. If I feel that you are going to go against the policies that I'm trying to implement within this electric power associations, that's not going to help everybody, but it'll help me and my family, I don't want you on the board. So I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you don't get on that board. And we've seen it. We've had people to be followed in the process of being canvassing. You have to put in a petition to run for the boards. We've had the Electric Power Association put out a memo to say, hey, if anybody come to your door, don't give them your account number or any information that's personal. And they know that in order to petition just to be on the board, you have to have sometimes 25 to 100 signatures. And so that stops you, because now you're at a tax where you're having to go back to the drawing board and say, how do I get these signatures? How do I make sure I'm doing effective messaging? So what I've learned, every year we prepare in January, it has to be a different campaign. You look at your losses from last year and you take them as a lesson and say, this is what I should do different. You always have to be 10 toes ahead.
Thank you for that, Seth.
Well, we did a lot of polling. I mean, you know, our utility opponents did a lot more polling than we did. So we learned things from what they took away also from their polls. I mean, they spent a total of 54 million, sorry, 37 million in a state that's, 1 million people. They talked a lot about risk, that this idea is risky. And I think we need to think about turning the tables on them. What are the risks of, depending on, a large, probably distantly owned, maybe foreign owned monopoly, for all of our electricity in the future. We're more and more dependent on, these massive corporations that don't care about us. That's risky, right? So if I can get solar, if I can sign up with Greg and get some, get some solar, that's safety, that's security, and that means a lot to people, right? So I think the other side of risk is safety and security, right? If we can really, sell people on the benefits of energy democracy, of a decentralized, more resilient energy future where you can be more safe and secure, that goes a long way. And the other thing that always rose to the top in our polling was cost. I totally agree with Catherine that cost is something that people really care about. I don't know, 20 years ago or something, somebody was running for office as a member of a new party called the Rent is Too Damn High, right? You remember that? The Rent is Too Damn High party? I mean, that's, we need to keep talking about cost, especially in the areas of the country where it really is extra, off the charts. I saw a question about, Washington State, and I just want to mention that, my power costs 10 times as much per kilowatt hour as it does in the public utility districts in Washington State. I mean, it's you can't even compare. So there are these areas in the country where poor people just can't afford their bills. It's really coming to that point. And you want us to change to an electric vehicle to decarbonize? You want me to change to a heat pump to heat and cool my home? Forget about it. Like, I can't afford that. So if we care about clean energy, we also need to take costs especially seriously in that regard as well.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mouse to work to unmute myself. Greg, do you have an answer to that question?
Well, I certainly in terms of, what's effective, we've been sort of blessed in so much that we're happy to be in a state where we have a administration that is very pro um, um, equity and in terms of wanting to put forward programs and policies to ensure a just transition. We've gotten support from as opposed to um, opposition from our utilities because they see a need, a necessity to change the status quo because we have some significant disparities in terms of just the numbers, in terms of programs. Because here in Massachusetts, we have a statewide solar program that pays incentives. Every ratepayer pays into that fund, but only the wealthiest of communities are taking advantage of those because of access to capital and other barriers. And they realize that can't continue because the numbers don't lie. It's hard to actually disguise the fact that you have a whole segment of our population paying into a system where they're not supposed to get a benefit and they're not receiving that benefit. And so we're seeing a window of opportunity. Now, how long it lasts will depend on a lot of factors, including political ones. But at least currently, we see a lot of support as opposed to opposition. Now, if we get wildly successful, I expect just the opposite to happen, to start having opposition. Even our private solar developers have all offered to help because they don't see us as a risk to their business yet. But we plan to be a risk to their business. Don't see any reason why of the additional 6 gigawatts that the governor's established to between now and 2030, why a good portion of that can't be owned by community. Why does it need to be private companies? And why do the owners of those private companies who have the profits only ones that financially benefit when we can actually create an environment where these funds can go to people as passive income, and that could be used for a variety of purposes, not just the acquisition of energy. I know someone in the chat asked a question regarding municipal aggregation programs and traditional community solar programs. These programs offer consumers a modest discount, somewhere between 10 and 20% off your utility bill. So there is some value there. There's far more value being able to own an asset that you're being paid to sell the electricity for, and being able to use those funds in a community in ways that benefit the community, either members directly. Other places are setting up solar trust funds that sort of money flows into a trust fund. The community decides to use the money to develop, renovate playgrounds, or to invest in electric vehicles or buses or whatever. So there's a lot of different opportunities when you think of this energy system transition outside the boundaries of purely environmental benefits, and see it as an opportunity to own assets, to generate jobs, to control who gets those jobs, and to provide this larger financial benefit in the form of what historically has been profits, but going to average low-income people. Our members pay a very modest $100 to join the co-op, and then they're paid as workers. And then they're earning shares in a cooperative, which guarantees them a share of the profits. And we are organizing our projects using these creative financing tools to lower our development costs, which makes the opportunity for us to be able to support more and more members of our community greater.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists, Catherine, Seth, Red, for sharing your knowledge and your fights on energy democracy. Fortunately, we are out of time for questions because I have to hand it back to Selena. But thanks, everyone. And Selena, you're on.
Thank you, everybody, for your shares. There's just so much expertise in this room and so much knowledge that was shared. As I mentioned, I dropped my email in the chat, and I'll drop it again for you all to reach out to me if you have any continued questions. We've done our best to capture as many as we possibly could during this short time, but this is just the start of the ongoing conversation. We've got one question in the chat that I did want to bring up around the externalities of renewable energy technologies. And we had the honor of hosting a conversation just a couple of months ago on the future of energy without extraction. What can that look like? How can we reimagine an energy system where there is no community that is a sacrifice zone, where everybody across race, class, and zip code around the globe can actively take part in this just transition and benefit from just transition. So there are some real blind spots that we have to consider as we're making these decisions around renewable energy. And that means holding justice as a priority in our heads and hearts as we continue to do this organizing. So I'll make sure to link that video in the follow-up that we do for this webinar. Before we leave, I do want to share, there's a couple more slides to let you all know what we can do next to take action together. And if we can just move forward just a couple of slides. Yep, perfect. Take action. Great. So we need all of you, no matter where you're coming from, if you're in the energy justice space, if you're in the traditional clean energy space, if you're in housing, racial justice, social justice, we need you here on board because we're all connected, our struggles and our victories. And by empowering communities and individuals like you to take control of our energy future, we can create a more just and sustainable world. So for today, there are 3 easy steps we want to encourage you all to take. Next slide, please. 1, we want you to stand in solidarity with organizing that's happening specifically in Puerto Rico. We didn't have the chance to speak more about the story, but if you follow this link, energydemocracy.us/refocus, you'll be able to learn more about what's going on and the types of action that you can take to support the ongoing organizing in the archipelago. Second, keep this conversation going. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, your colleagues, talk on social media, and use this hashtag. I'll be following up with more resources. And then lastly, take the survey in the chat. We've got a survey. I think we're going to drop it in the chat. And if not, we'll share it after this event too. But we just want to know, how did this event go for you? What did you learn? What sticks out to you? Would love to, like I said, keep this conversation going and know that our organizing is so linked and our wins in the now and in the near future are also very linked. So thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day and much appreciated for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.